For everyone with an interest in MASH, or more broadly, steatotic liver disease, Surf's Up. Season 6, Episode 4, Surfing the MASH Tsunami, starts now.
For the last 5 years, MASLD stakeholders, whether manufacturers, trial sites, providers, payers, patients, or investors, have turned to Surfing the MASH Tsunami to keep track of drug and device development, epidemiology, public health initiatives, and practice patterns. This weekend, we are sharing the 3 main sections from our Episode 4. Our Roundtable section looks at the many reasons to walk away from the Emerging Trends Conference with renewed optimism. Our Newsmaker discussion with Mike Betel of the Fatty Liver Alliance focuses on the increased thirst for patient advocate involvement in all sorts of conferences, far beyond AASLD and EASL. And our expert interview with hepatologist and key opinion leader Mazen Noureddin focuses on the issues he finds exciting and important in drug development.
This week on Surfing the MASH Tsunami.
We're looking into a transformative future for people with steatotic liver disease, not just those with low alcohol, the MASLD, but certainly also alcohol. So it's going to be super exciting the next 10 years.
I have seen such an increase in people who are working together now and breaking the silos, like what happened in this meeting, like what's happening today here in this podcast, right? Because I'm on surfing MASH, and I've got alcohol-associated liver disease.
Is that accurate in your experience in meetings you go to? That people who aren't part of the liver community don't know a lot about liver and how liver fits into all this?
I absolutely agree that this is the beginning of that relationship. From our perspective, I do believe that it's going to be up to us to connect with them on their space, in their world, to be able to share that back.
Let me try to be as concise, because I want people to listen to this in 25 minutes and get the updates. And as you know, your podcast has been also very informative, and a lot of people take the information from here.
This week's sponsors for Surfing the MASH Tsunami include
Madrigal Pharmaceuticals, Inc. is a biopharmaceutical company focused on delivering novel therapeutics for metabolic dysfunction-associated steatohepatitis, or MASH, a liver disease with high unmet medical need. Madrigal's medication, Rezdiffra, resmetirom, is a once-daily oral liver-directed THR beta agonist designed to target key underlying causes of MASH. Rezdiffra is the first and only medication approved by the FDA for the treatment of MASH with moderate to advanced fibrosis, consistent with stages F2 to F3. An ongoing Phase 3 outcomes trial is evaluating Rezdiffra for the treatment of compensated MASH cirrhosis, consistent with stage F4C. For more information, visit www.madrigalpharma.com.
LiverRight and the LiverRight Scanning Network. On April 15th, 2025, LiverRight will open America's first virtual specialty clinic for liver disease, offering adults in all 50 states video appointments and helping GI practices and health systems triage and treat the swelling numbers of patients seeking MASLD and MASH testing. LiverRight offers same-week video visits and accepts insurance. For more information, contact LiverRight, that's liver, and then RIGHT at www.liverright.com.
Tawazin Health, your partner in global liver health innovation. At Tawazin Health, we specialize in providing small or large-scale access to FibroScan examinations for liver health-focused early detection, clinical trials, independent research, and collaborative projects with clinicians and FibroScan providers increasingly throughout the world. As industry-leading experts, we design and deliver high-quality FibroScan services because we know that accurate, high-quality, reliable data drives better outcomes. To learn about our sister lifestyle app, mylife365.me, click the Tawazin Health link on the Surfing MASH homepage.
Hi there, and welcome to Episode 4. First, if I sound different, it's because I'm struck with the podcaster's least favorite ailment, laryngitis. If I wanted to yell at the top of my lungs right now, it wouldn't be much louder than this, although my voice would probably be a bunch scratchier. Past that, let's talk about the episode. This week's episode has a tremendously optimistic undertone. The roundtable discussion is the wrap-up from our AASLD Emerging Trends Conference discussion on MASLD, Met-ALD, and ALD, and it mostly focuses on the impressions and thoughts panelists took from the conference with them. These takeaways were overwhelmingly positive. Our Newsmaker interview with Mike Betel of the Fatty Liver Institute. We focus on the increasing number and breadth of conferences he's being invited to attend, what this tells us about the rising status of MASLD within the metabolic diseases communities, and the messages he gets to share and hear that he might not have been part of before. Finally, our expert interview is with Mazen Noureddin, focusing on an exceptionally positive drug development picture, with multiple classes stepping forward and addressing some of the most interesting and formidable challenges we face, notably progress on cirrhosis. All these conversations are exciting and positive, so have fun listening.
First, our roundtable discussion, Part 4. Louise and Roger are joined by Professor Alexander Krag from the University of Southern Denmark, who is the current Secretary General of the European Association for the Study of the Liver, Dr. Alexander Lelos from Robert Wood Johnson Hospital, and Zhen Lee Jones, founder of the Sober Livers Patient Support Group. Today, the discussion concludes with two different perspectives on the future of drug development and patient treatment, each of which offers new and unique reasons for optimism.
With that said, let's turn to today's guests and get rolling with the business portion of our session. First of all, we have Louise. Hey, Louise, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much. Nice to be back. Nice to see everybody on the other end of the screen.
Yeah. Since the last 6 months, how many times have you been to Australia?
3.
Yeah.
So it's nice to be in a decent time zone. Normally, this would be tomorrow for me.
Louise will sound alert and awake, and that's because it's not 2 in the morning in Perth. Well, it is 2 in the morning in Perth, but she's not in Perth. And she's awaiting eagerly a football match at 4 o'clock our time that will determine exactly how successful Liverpool will be this year. Alexander Krag, how are you today, sir?
I'm good. Thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation to come and join you here.
And thank you for joining. And you say a lot of rain in southern Denmark, huh?
No, we've actually had some pretty nice days here. We see the first flowers coming up. So spring is near, even here in the far north.
That's wonderful. It's wonderful. And then we have our good friend Jen Jones back with us again from Sober Livers. Hey, Jen, how are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Back from Vegas. I've been busy since I've gotten back because I realized when I take a short vacation or a conference, nobody's doing my job. So I came back to lots of emails and lots of work to do for our program.
Okay. Maybe you'll tell us a little bit about Vegas. And then our new guest, first-timer, is Alex Lelos. Alex is a hepatologist. He's on faculty at Rutgers and treats patients and is an advisor to our new sponsor, LiverRight. So, Alex, why don't you take a minute or two, tell everybody in the podcast world a little bit about yourself and what you do and how you came to be here today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I have a lot of interest in this field, actually, just being a clinical hepatologist. You know, we kind of went through the whole Hep C thing, and I just feel like the whole world has transitioned now into what this is probably the most significant liver disease. But it's good to join everybody. And Roger, I know you asked me to say something about me, and I guess I'm kind of boring. I don't really know what to say. I will say one thing that probably people don't realize that much. I have a Greek name. I was born in the United States, but I'm really, really very Greek. Most of my cousins were born in Greece. I spent 3 or 4 summers there when I was a kid. I speak fluent Greek. I have an apartment in Athens. I have a couple of close relatives there. So sometimes when people meet me, they kind of get surprised that, they know their name is Greek, but they're kind of surprised how Greek I am. It's part of my identity. I listen to the music, but still an American at heart.
We now have a Greek American. If you're a resident/citizen of both Australia and England, what is the hyphenated phrase to describe that?
Let's put it this way, 60% of Perth is English. So I think you could call them Australian.
Okay.
Poms with we're called from the other side. It's why the demographic of fatty liver disease is following everybody around the world.
Louise, what's that city in Australia that's 30% Greek? Melbourne or?
Sydney has a very big Greek community when I was living there, and they burnt down the cinema, the theatre, when you won the Euros, because I lived around the corner. They got a bit exuberant when you won that tournament. So I'd say Sydney's got a very big Greek community, but I think Melbourne does as well.
If we can't agree on a definition of MASLD, it's kind of hard to do a clinical trial on MASLD. But by the way, it's not clear to me that we need to for the reason you just said. And that's before you get to Anime Deal's paper questioning, well, if all senescent cells, no matter what organ they're in, have iron overloads, why are we worrying so much time about the narrowness of the definition, and why aren't we spending more work on what do we do about reducing iron overload in patients where these things are leading to a lot of cell death and a lot of really bad stuff?
Of course, there's needed a lot of research, and we've long known at least alcohol and iron, they go together and accumulates iron. To what extent it's really part of the story and to what extent it really associated with the clinical outcome, if what extent modification of it will alter the clinical outcome, these are still unanswered questions. So that's, again, we generate a lot of new knowledge that sometimes make us smarter, sometimes make it more challenging, and also sometimes confuses us a little bit. But it's definitely a part of the story. But I think the good news, again, to be optimistic here, if we look 10 years back, it was failure. Now we got a ton of drug, the first approved drug. The next GLP-1 or incretin base is coming, and there's several coming next. The signals are super strong. We got the FGF21s, at least in phase 2, look very good. So it's a breakthrough in hepatology. This is what we saw with the DAAs, more or less, what is coming out now with the FGF21. It's transformative that you can see you can reverse fibrosis, you can reverse cirrhosis, and this is just the beginning. So honestly, I'm really optimistic. We may not understand the full mechanism. Basically, we don't fully understand what is resmetirom actually doing, yet it works. And that's, again, amazing. So I think we should definitely have the optimistic, and it's an important part in the history of hepatology. Also, why this timing of bridging the steatotic liver disease community together is super helpful for the patients, and hopefully we'll see also pharma seeing that the unmet need and the opportunities is for their drugs in the sister or brother disease just next to it, and where they are sometimes is definitely something to pursue.
Point well made, point well taken. One of the things in that regard that I found really exciting is when they were showing SNPs on Thursday, that you found the SNPs of FGF21 aligned both with MASLD and with cirrhosis, with steatosis and fibrosis, so that fundamentally you have this one mode of action that could have success anywhere from F2 on through to portal hypertension.
That would be the magic again. Yeah. FGF21s, you can see the Akero study, that at least as now we know from the press release, that was reversal of cirrhosis. That's a breakthrough. And it's being tested. There are various FGF21s also in earlier stages. So, and again, it goes on a completely different pathway than GLP-1s. So they could potentially be combined. There's several opportunities there.
Agreed.
In that paper, actually, I believe if you look at the KPA, this is the Akero, the FGF21, the KPA values were as high as, I think, 25 to 26 or something, and they dropped, I believe, about 25%. So even though they weren't decompensated, these people were borderline portal hypertension. I mean, these were pretty significant underlying liver disease. And you kind of wonder, getting back to Jen's, can you give this to someone with alcohol-related liver disease at some point? I mean, I guess we're getting a little bit on in this podcast, but I've been doing this a long time, and I have three things, and Roger's heard these because I make it part of my talk, but I was around when Prilosec came out, and I thought, my God, this is a miracle. All these people who had erosive esophagitis are coming in. Oh, I'm so much better. And the next big thing that I experienced, I think, was around, 2013, 2014, when I still remember going to the AASLD and hearing Ray Chung give the whole thing about the DAAs, and we were all just floored, I think, that this is over. I mean, not over, but compared to interferon ribavirin, I thought this is amazing. And I think this is the third big thing that I've witnessed in my life as a doctor. And I think it might be the biggest, just because, not everybody has reflux, not everybody, erosive esophagitis, not everybody has Hep C, but how many people in the world have this? I mean, and it's cardiac disease, renal disease. I mean, it comes to the crux of general health. So it's just a great time, a very interesting time to be in this field, just because it just seems like there's so many. The confusion is actually a good thing, because it just means that there's a lot of things that are going to be out there.
So, Alex, let me use that comment, unless someone else doesn't want to say, use that as a bridge to final question, since we've been at this for quite a while now. And it's great, but it's been quite a while. Final question for each of you. Two questions, really. Number one is something you're taking away from this discussion or took away from the meeting that you didn't have before you got to the meeting. And the second is something you would like listeners to take away from this discussion. Brave one, go first.
I'm happy to go first. I might repeat myself, but my key takeaway, the more I look into it, we should not see MASLD in isolation. We need to see steatotic liver disease as a spectrum. And that's why it was a great meeting, because that was the topic. Then I think what's important for the listeners, patients and doctors and researchers, is that there's a lot of optimism. I think what we know now, we can see these breakthroughs across not just one drug, but several drugs and whole drug classes, means that we are looking into a transformative future for people with steatotic liver disease, not just those with low alcohol, the MASLD, but certainly also alcohol. So it's going to be super exciting the next 10 years.
Excellent.
Well, first of all, I've really enjoyed this conversation, as I always do when I come on Roger's podcast. We have very lively discussions. So thank you. And what I was getting from this conversation is yes, MASLD is this wonderful tool or diagnosis that we have. But again, not a good idea to focus on clinical trials in this area at this point. Let's put it in one category or another category when we're doing the study with the understanding that there may be this alcohol involved, I think is a really good way for us to proceed. But yeah, exactly. Exciting times. I mean, for me, I recall when I started advocating, which was probably 2020 when I really started advocating, I have seen such an increase in people being aware of alcohol-associated liver disease, but also people who are working together now and breaking the silos, like what happened in this meeting, like what's happening today here in this podcast, right? Because I'm on surfing MASH and I've got alcohol-associated liver disease. I mean, this is how we're changing. I'm part of 2 working groups for the Global NASH Council. I mean, all these silos are getting broken and we are coming together as a group for the liver. And hopefully we can get legislation out of it. We can get some policy out of it. We can get some really good and hopefully really, really good drugs out of it, which is we're making some turning points there. Liver transplant. I mean, all of these things we are really pushing forward finally as a team. And that's what I really like about this conversation and also about what happened at the ETC.
As somebody who didn't attend the conference, listening to you all here, I suppose, undermines that the conference's commitment and the field's commitment to addressing multifaceted diseases, whether it's MASLD, Met-ALD or ALD, and that we can use the opportunities that we get across that spectrum to improve patient care and outcomes. Just grabbing on something that Alex said, yes, there's a lot of people out there. So people like ourselves who get to the coalface like you guys do, our job is only getting bigger to be able to share that detail and information with primary care for the early diagnosis and the support of patients out there. And I think the field is here to develop. That's the one thing I'd like listeners to take away, is that we are developing and the speed of the changes in the next few years will be absolutely massive. And I think that's exciting.
Okay, Alex.
Number one, I'll tell you that this whole concept of Met-ALD, obviously I knew about it before I came in, but I guess I didn't appreciate how really important it really is. This, I don't want to sound like I came in ignorant, but I think I appreciate the nuances a lot more and the questions that it raises. The one thing I don't think we covered that much, and I my background again is a lot clinical, and like I said, I used to work for a big multi-specialty group that looked at the way we practice. And my challenge, and the lectures by Ray Kim and some of the FibroScan lectures raises the question as to we're outlining how we're going to, if you can't fix it if you can't find it. That's my I like to say that we have to find the problem in order to fix it. If you don't have a fix, don't bother to look for the problem. But now we have a fix. So we got to find these patients and to go out and find them and get primary care to engage and understand this disease and appreciate the FIB4 or whatever test we all embrace ultimately. And then to get the access for the fibro scanning. Roger and I have been involved in discussing that we can find all the FIB4s we want, but if we can only do 10, at Rutgers, we do 10 or 12 fibro scans a week for the whole system. That's just not enough. So the challenge is not only the stuff we talked about, but how are we going to take the next step and on a population level really impact this disease? And that's going to take, primary care, politicians, insurers, pharmaceuticals, and we have to lead the charge. But Alexander, Louise, myself, any of the other guys, it's not enough of us to do it. So that's going to be the next big challenge, I think, and it's probably something for another podcast, really.
Oh, or six more podcasts. It's a major topic. I've always said that complication is a problem, but complexity usually is pretty simple. The idea that we can take alcohol, diet, put them on a continuum, understand that with a genetic overlay on one side and some questions about counseling on the other, there's a lot here. But the more we have one set of skills or one set of disciplines to look at, the better over time we're going to be dealing with it. So I believe that's true. I think as we're making this more complex, we're also making it simpler to conceptualize. And then obviously things like FGF21 pop out and seem to be more universal, or the incretin agonists than others, number one. Number two, I think, Jen, this goes back to your talk. We all have to learn how to listen better. And we have a system that hasn't built a lot of time in for listening, really anywhere in the world. So we need to think about classes of providers that can be better listeners and then can translate that for those who don't have time to listen or as much time to listen into action that makes sense. I think if we look at doctors and say, you guys have to listen better, treat more carefully, be more thoughtful, see more patients, that just isn't all going to happen. So we need to think at the same time about how do we treat the different elements of this. I think these are fantastic questions. I thought it was an amazing meeting, Alexander. I got to tell you. And I missed Esther sadly, but I'm told that was pretty spectacular as well. All right. With that, anybody have anything they want to add? Go ahead, Louise.
It's so nice to be back having conversations with everybody.
You and me. You and me. It's exactly right.
Miss it.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
And I have to do a plug for Sober Livers. It's soberlivers with an S.org. So if you or anyone who is suffering from alcohol-associated liver disease or have had a transplant due to alcohol or love someone who is, you go there. You can join one of our meetings, our Facebook group, and we are also looking for money so to sustain our program. And so if you are someone or someone who can help us with that, go to soberlivers.org and you can donate to our program. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Everybody just stick with us, okay? Because we'll come back with more elements of this episode. But let me say thanks to our panel right now. You guys, Alexander, you have something you want to add before we go?
Yeah. No, I just want to invite you all to Amsterdam. So the next big splash in hepatology, where everybody from the world comes together across, if you're interested in clinics, hands-on frontline research, you're a patient advocate, you're a liver nurse, whatever. We got it all in Amsterdam. So come and join the EASL Congress in Amsterdam, May 7th to 10th. I'm looking forward to see you all.
I'm nice.
Alexander, I want to plug on too. I've been going to EASL for the last 7 years because going full circle, I like to go to Greece after and check on my apartment there. But I will tell you, the EASL conference, I find the meeting great. I think it's a great meeting, and I encourage any U.S. physicians that might be listening here interested in liver disease to really look into it, not only for social reasons and traveling reasons. It is a great meeting. It really is.
In today's Newsmaker segment, Fatty Liver Alliance founder and CEO Mike Betel joins Roger to discuss the dramatic increase in the number of conferences he is being invited to attend. Mike focuses on the breadth of topics at these conferences, the role he plays, the message he is delivering, and also what he is learning about where MASLD fits in the larger metabolic disease world.
We're back with week 4 Newsmaker interview of the week, and our Newsmaker for the second time in 4 weeks is Mike Betel from Fatty Liver Alliance. Mike, how are you this morning?
I'm great, and I'm appreciative.
Part of the reason you're here is that one of us has to have a voice, and as you can hear, this is about what I've got. It actually sounds better than it did on the interview I did with Mazen Noureddin yesterday afternoon, so I'm making some progress. The reason I wanted to have Mike with us today is because Mike's having an interesting year, and I guess what I mean by that is that after spending a couple of years going to most of the major meetings on the circuit and doing a bunch of advocacy things, he's been invited to lots of different kinds of events this year and has really become not the only patient advocate in the space. Obviously, there are a bunch of them, but a guy who's a patient advocate for steatotic liver disease and liver disease winds up going to a bunch of different kinds of meetings with different organizations. I know one of them is ISPOR, which is an organization I used to go to when I ran the marketing research firm because they did all the pricing and outcomes research. They're the pricing and outcomes research person. So I wanted Mike to talk a little bit about A, what he's going to be doing this year, and B, the process by which he's come to be invited to present and speak at all this stuff and what it says to you, Mike, about how people are looking at patients and patient advocacy, how professionals are looking at patients and patient advocacy in this space in 2025. So with that, because I can't talk that much, I'm going to let you go and I'll just stop and ask questions from time to time.
A rare opportunity with you to get the last word, first word, middle word. I have really learned and listened to what people want to know more about. And the opportunity to go to conferences around the world is rare. And I would like to be the one who can share back information that is real time with people who don't have the opportunity to attend these meetings. So I feel quite fortunate that I get to be, as you've shared before, the one sitting in the front row center, paying very close attention to every word that the speakers are saying so that I can share it back as it's happening. And I do post a lot of different topics and research papers and discussions with key opinion leaders from around the world. But I find that one of the most popular activities is really sharing back these live presentations as they're happening, because it gives people a chance to really relate to the speakers and the topics in a timely manner and actually share back comments with others as I post them. And some of those activities that I share have in the 30, 40, even sometimes 50% engagement rate, which means that it's very important to people. And that's why I'm going to continue to do those from conferences really around the world. So they have Canadian conferences. There's also the ones in the United States and also the ones in Europe. So I get a chance to be at as many as I can in a year. And I actually have, I think, between 15 and 20 booked in the next 12 months. So that's a lot.
As you've been to all these conferences, what are some of the things you're learning about the community that surprises you? We'll talk about the content in a minute, but you also get to touch the community more often and in more different ways than, and by that I mean the academic and the policy communities and all those folks, right?
Well, it's the academic community, the research community, the clinician community, there's the patient advocacy community, there's the aspects about multidisciplinary inclusion as well. And so you're right. I can't put my finger exactly on the differences between the different conferences. Some of them stand out. In particular, the Liver Forum for Collaborative Research, which I just came back from, that is very clearly set up to involve researchers and industry and government and patient advocates to work closely together to maximize synergies, to share information about the research that they're doing, to try to improve patient outcomes by reducing maybe the length of studies or the need for biopsies or, the inclusion, reduction of stigma, all of those things. So those ones are really clearly about those types of people working together in different job functions, which I think is really important. There are also a lot of meetings like I find AASLD and EASL are a mix of probably all those groups as well, but they're more about some of the research, updated research that's happening, as well as clinical applications in practice. What are the practical suggestions, insights, tips that we can use in our clinics? I mean, that type of thing happens a lot as well. So that was an interesting question because it is a little bit of a different culture at different meetings.
Tell all of us about one meeting you've been to in the last 6 months or year that was really different than what you expected and why.
The last one I went to that I was surprised, and it was a bit of a pilot for me, was the American Diabetes Association. And I wanted to explore the importance of creating that conduit between the liver space and the diabetes space. There's also the obesity area too, which was actually covered at the diabetes conference as well. But I went there and it was Zubair Younasi and Mazen Noureddin, I think were the only two speakers there that I knew. But I had an opportunity to meet so many people and learn so much about the interconnectiveness between those two disciplines and why they're important. And I'm also learning that the liver was not, front and center at a lot of that. So I'm hoping this year is going to be different. But with regard to the surprise, it was like, wow, I'm really happy I went to this because I wouldn't normally have gone to that conference. And I liked it so much. I joined the ADA and I also joined ACE, which is a conference I'm going to go to for the first time this year as well.
When is ACE? That's coming right up, isn't it? Relatively quickly.
The ACE conference is May 15th to 17th.
You're going to go from Amsterdam to ACE, huh?
I'm going to go, well, yeah, I have things in between, but it's part of my own clinical care pathway. my educational care pathway. Yeah.
Go to Toronto, go to the doctor. Got it. Okay, fine. So that's interesting. And how do people at, say, Jorn's talked about this a little bit from the medical perspective about going to EASD and some things are going on at UEG. But how do people respond to you when they understand that what you're about is a whole different part of metabolism than the one that they live in?
I think numbers speak for themselves. And so for me, one of the indicators are the number of new connections that I make personally and through the connection with the Fatty Liver Alliance. And so when I go to conferences like that, I absolutely see an influx of new followers at those meetings. I actually participate too. So I have stood up at the microphone and asked questions that are relevant to liver that they may not have heard. And so that's still new for them. But it was a really great interaction opportunity. I even had the opportunity at the ADA to learn more about the CGM, the continuous glucose monitor. So Dexcom has one that I use every year. But when you're at the conference, you can actually go to talks where they're sharing the importance of getting that feedback for patients and understanding why it works and why it's important. Rachel, one of the nurses that are there as an example, actually signed me up and I got a CGM while I was there, and I put it on right at the conference as well. And by the way, the other whole area about obesity, I was invited to do a talk at the Obesity Summit. That's the European Association for Study of Obesity. That's in Malaga. That one is the one that is right after EASL. So I'm facilitating a panel there, and we're going to be talking about the connection between liver and obesity. So there is definitely an openness, I guess, or opportunity for co-learning between these disciplines.
Tell me a little bit, or tell our audience again, a little bit about what they've learned from you that surprises you and what you've learned from them that surprises you. In meetings with other disciplines, is there anything that when you talk to the diabetes people, the obesity people about liver, you're either surprised that they don't know or they're surprised at how much it should mean to them? And then I'm going to flip the question again and ask you, how about things that you've heard that surprised you?
What I learned from it, I'll go take that route first because I'm there to learn. That's the reason in my mind I'm going to these things, is to try to enhance my abilities in the liver space. And the number one thing that I've learned, and I think it came from the quite a few obesity summits and conferences I've gone to recently, that words matter. And stigma is a big thing that we don't think about very often. And so I've changed the way that I am using some of the language that I have in this people first perspective, looking at the language choices like patients live with obesity or patients who have cirrhosis, not cirrhotic patients or MASLD patients. And I think 90% of clinicians still say, I hear it all the time, oh, I just saw a MASH patient last week. Let's get away from the MASH patient and say a patient who has MASH. We shouldn't be defined by our disease. There are a number of co-investigators involved in a paper that's going to be coming out just before EASL with Jeff Lazarus leading it. I know Shira Zelbersagi's part of it and I'm part of it. And it's a people first charter on why language matters. So that's something I learned a lot about, is just the sensitivity that people can use that need to use the right words. The other thing is it's extremely important for clinicians to ask permission before they start to give advice. And that sounds so contra what we've learned and what we expect from physicians, because we usually go to physicians and we want them to tell us what to do. But when it comes to patients and the sensitivity that patients have who are living with obesity, as an example, as one of the big risk factors for MASLD and MASH, before you start telling people to lose weight, it's really important to understand why, how long, and ask permission. Is it okay to talk about this with you? Because they may not want to talk about it. And we have to learn to consider people's feelings more.
I'm going to ask an insensitive and naive question that isn't one I would normally ask myself, but I think some of your other listeners might, which is, well, if it's something people need to learn about and they don't want to talk about it, then isn't that kind of their tough luck?
So that question is something that came up also at an obesity event that I went to. And what that specialist said is, you know how we've talked about I love myself the way I am aspect of it? So what this physician said is that if patients are living with obesity, but their health has not been impacted, which is possible, then that's fine. If their health is impacted, then the physician has to talk about the outcomes, but maybe maybe in a way that does not talk about that particular person's physique or body, and more about, for example, in our space, the fat that is around the liver. It's different. There are a lot of doctors that say you need to lose your liver fat. They don't say you need to lose body fat. And so there's the visceral fat, which is the bad fat that we're concerned about, although there is definitely a relationship between other things like, the abdominal waist circumference and all of that stuff as indicators.
So part of this becomes simply, how do you listen to patients? And based on what you hear, what is appropriate to discuss and how is it appropriate to discuss it? Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah. My favorite topic, Roger, of all is the importance of tailored care. And we keep hearing, and it shows up in the slide decks all the time, where we have a patient-centric approach, a patient-centric model. But we need to remember that all of the work that we all do with regard to clinical research and with regard to the work we do every day is for the benefit and the outcomes of patients. So patient care is really important. One of the challenges that primary care has, and specialists as well, is the amount of work that they have. The opportunity to do that work in the time that they have is a big challenge. So when there's a waiting room full of people and a patient walks in, if the clinician can realize that the patient is already stressed out because they were waiting and they're worrying and they're probably up for a night or two before worrying about their condition and, are they going to live or not live and what's going to mean for their life changes. Then they come into the doctor's office already sensing the doctor's busy, so they're afraid to ask the questions that really matter to them. So we encourage people to come prepared with questions to ask the doctors so that they can have a really meaningful conversation. And one of the things that some clinicians do, and it's because they have to do it, is entering into the EMR. And it's just distracting, I think, for patients that when they finally get to the doctor and they've waited and they go in the clinic and then the doctor's back is sort of turned to them while they're looking at the file and entering data, there's less communication. So somehow we have to get to the point where we can do that cost-benefit balance thing between, okay, I have like 5 to 8 minutes or whatever the time is with the patient. I'm going to try to look them in the eye and ask them what are their concerns today and how I can help them. And then together partner with ways that they could help the patient do better. It can't be a didactic message. It has to be collaborative. Like Jonathan Stein has the exercise prescriptions, and that's a collaboration. It's like, what do you think is the reasonable amount of activity that you can do? And this is what I think that you need to get to, so let's do this. And he'll actually write a prescription. And so that's one approach to trying to solve that collaborative approach to care.
Interesting. That's a question really of how to, and exercise is an interesting one to choose, right? Because exercise is something that a lot of folks who live with obesity, for example, find really challenging to think about, right? As a guy who's lost 50 pounds talking to a guy who's lost some weight in the course of his life, we both know that getting into exercise when you're significantly overweight is a hard thing to do.
Well, first of all, when we say the recommendation in the guidelines is 150 minutes a week, plus you should do some muscle strengthening exercises as well. 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, moderate exercise. Okay, it sounds reasonable. It makes, say, 10,000 steps still seems to be the target that people should get, except if some people are living with obesity and they have a lot of extra weight, 10,000 steps is really, really going to be hard for them to start. So they need to literally take the first step of that journey and work their way up. And that is, I think, one of the topics of discussion with their physician is, where are you at right now and where do you think you can get to and what's stopping you? Maybe together they can come up with ways to get them a little bit closer to what they need to be at.
That's interesting. I don't know about you, but when I started needing to lose a lot of weight and I started going into the gym, I really couldn't do very much. It was kind of appalling to me because I'd been a pretty good athlete, or not pretty good athlete, but a pretty good endurance person, moderate athlete. It meant the world to me that people would encourage me and that people would come up to me and say, hey, I was where you are and this is where I am now. Just one step at a time, you can do this. So are there any kind of, in the places that you're going, the meetings that you're going to, are there positive feedback loops of any kind built in to communicate to patients that way in those moments?
There have been at many conferences, well, really all of them have opportunities for Q&A with speakers. The only thing is most patients or patient advocates haven't had the courage always to stand up in front of physicians and speak. So it's not something that's very common, but for example, EASL's coming up, and there is specifically a patient session, which I would love if anybody who's going to EASL would come to. And Shira Zelbersagi and I are on the panel. And it's really going to help a lot of patients if they listen to some of the talks. For example, some of the topics are about patients that have difficulty getting the same care as other patients because of either where they live, or maybe it's socioeconomic or some other reason, or it could be even stigma related. So I think that whole session is going to be really interesting. But those are opportunities where patients can interact with the panels as an example.
Okay, so what have you been able to convey to people in these meetings that they didn't know? I mean, when you go to a diabetes meeting or an obesity meeting, for example.
Well, I think I share at those points how patients that have MASLD or MASH can benefit from a lot of those tips and tricks, if you will, that they're sharing at those meetings. So, the liver, like you said, it is not something that's brought up all the time, but when you're at the conference and they're talking, as an example, they're talking about the use of CGMs and how they benefit patients because they give continual feedback on the types of foods that are eaten and the impact on the glucose and, inevitably that insulin response. So just that one patient tool can also help the MASLD and MASH communities because they can help reduce the amount of fat that's going to be stored in the liver. And so that's one example.
One of the impressions I keep getting over and over again is that those communities don't really know a lot about liver. Is that accurate in your experience in the meetings you go to? That people who aren't part of the liver community don't know a lot about liver and how liver fits into all this?
I absolutely agree that this is the beginning of that relationship. From our perspective, I do believe that it's going to be up to us to connect with them on their space, in their world, to be able to share that back. The fact that they already had last year 2 speakers, and I know that they're going to have more this year, shows that there is some interest in that area. And even industry started to be there. The liver space industry started to have booths, a couple of them last year at those events, like the diabetes event. So I am going to go out of my way. I'm making a commitment right here with you right now that at these meetings, I am going to listen for opportunities where I can express a connection between what they're talking about at that moment and the struggles that liver patients have and that the community needs to learn. So that's a good first step to at least bring it up in a group setting like that.
Point well taken. And because we will have you back on the podcast, we'll be able to check and see how effectively you've done that and what you've learned in the process. Okay, so I guess I'm particularly interested in ISPOR. Have you been to an ISPOR meeting or any of the policy meetings yet?
No, this is the first one, and I was invited to be there. There's a symposium that is sponsored by Novo Nordisk, actually. And when I was asked, I go, you want me to go to a global health economics conference? It's weird, but having a patient there express the impact of inaction in the MASH area is important. For that particular event, just to let you know the other people that are going to be there, and this is on May 15th in Montreal. The people that are going to be there are Jeff Lazarus, of course, he's fantastic at speaking about the global perspective, and Sonal Kumar, so, of hepatology from that perspective, and Donna Cryer is going to be moderating that event. So it's going to be a really interesting panel discussion for sure.
Oh, that should be fantastic. And since you've not been to a pure policy or economics meeting like that before, asking you how those are different would be a little premature, but we will get back to you with that at some point later in the year.
Well, my messaging is a little different. I actually did some research, and I have on one of the slides just the impact of inaction in dollars and the impact that can be made if we actually do something, between now and 2050, I think. It sounds hard when you say 2050. It's like a long way away, but...
Oh, it's a long way away. If you're our age, and I'm a lot older than you are, but the odds that either one of us is going to be hanging out in 2050 are kind of interesting, if I put that correctly.
My uncle used to say to buy green bananas, so keep buying your green bananas so that you can be there while they ripen.
That's a lot better than the old George Burns line about how you live to be 100. Start when you're 20 and smoke one cigar a day every day for 80 years. That's not exactly a health concept. I like the green bananas a lot better. So only one other question, which is, as look, just for those who don't know, Mike started out as a sales rep in a drug company selling interferon and ribavirin for hepatitis back in the day.
No, 1988, I was doing dermatology and I launched Claritin, believe it or not. So that was the beginning of that. But the first specialty drug in the liver space was Intron A for hepatitis B. And then after that was non-A, non-B, because they didn't even have a name for hepatitis C yet.
Right.
That's how long I've been doing this for.
Mike has traversed the path from specialty sales rep to industry person, now to patient advocate. If you knew then what you know now, how would you have approached the idea of being a sales rep or a marketer inside a drug company differently than you did at the time?
I swear that I'm telling you the truth. I would not change a thing. And I thought a lot about why I feel like I can be the one of, there's obviously many very capable patient advocates too, but why I can be one that shares messages that are relevant to industry as well as to patients as well as to physicians is because everything I've done has led up to this. And when you can say that about a role that you're in, it just means a lot to me. When I wake up and I go, well, first I had to learn what physicians want to know. And in a way, a lot of what I'm doing is the same thing I did when I was a rep. So instead of going to the university library on Mondays, the day that the new journals came in, photocopying the papers that I knew that the physicians wanted, and then running to their office to be with a note, or if I didn't see them, to be the first one to bring it to their office. Now we're using social media to share the messages in those papers. So it's just a modern way of doing this, the same thing, which is really funny in my mind. That's one piece of it. And I learned about the sensitivities of the pharma industry and the respect that you have to have for legal and regulatory. And so that moderates some of what I do so that I know what we can, what we can and shouldn't do. And plus, I was involved in a lot of patient advocacy when we were trying to get medications for hepatitis C approved, as an example. So I had a chance to relate to patients even back then and understand some of the challenges with reimbursement or clinical trial enrollment, early access programs, all of that stuff. So everything I did has given me more confidence in what I'm doing today. And I'm very grateful for that whole run of experience that I've had.
Interesting. As you know, my background was different. You came out of the industry. I came out of service and support to the industry. And one of the differences I found is that my ability to deliver a clear message unfiltered by corporate politics and individual priorities is much greater. I bumped into a guy who used to work for me Saturday night at a social event here, and he asked me what's different. And I said, well, what's different now is if you have something you want to deliver, it actually gets transmitted the way you deliver it, as compared to what happens when it passes through three people's ears and mouths based on their own agenda and needs. So I feel a lot cleaner that way, but it's interesting because you were talking to docs. I guess that's a little different. So as we wind down this particular conversation, what advice would you have for our listeners who are providers about what to take away from your talk, from this conversation, or what meetings they should go to, or what they should try to access that they might not be thinking about right now? Start there.
I'm going to fall back on my key message, number one, and that's to treat every patient like they're an individual. There is no way to treat every patient the same way and to just tell patients, and this is one I've heard back many times from patients themselves. So telling patients that they need to eat less and exercise more, and you'll see them in 6 months, is completely inappropriate now. Every patient has different challenges, and so you need to take a few minutes just to talk to the patient, especially at the first initial visit, and learn about what their challenges are so you can help be a problem solver with them. So my message is treat people like individuals, treat them like you would want to be treated as a patient, which you or someone in your family most likely is or will be, and you will have a great relationship with the patient and really help them in the long term.
Interesting. And listening to you, a question came to mind that I don't think I've ever asked you or anybody else. If I look at you and I'm the doctor and you're the patient and I say to you, exercise more, lose weight, and come see me in 6 months, there's a presumption that you haven't tried that yet.
100% true.
And what percentage of patients would you guess have tried to lose weight or exercise more before they get to the doctor in the first place?
99.9. If you asked me a different question and you said, what percentage of people know how to do those things, I would say it's maybe half. Because I do hear a lot of people who you talk about cutting back on fructose as an example, the types of foods that they're eating that they just somehow have not been exposed to the fact that high carbohydrate diets are not very good for you in the long term. And so I think the how, I agree that less people are informed and educated that way. And that could also be cultural impact too, the way that they eat, the social activities that they participate in, all of that adds pressures to eat when maybe we're not hungry. And so I think that's a partial driver of that.
So in open-ended questioning then, and I know this is a long list question, please forgive me. In open-ended questioning, instead of telling you to lose weight and exercise more, I would start by asking you, have you tried to do that in the past? And what have you done? And has it worked for you? Now, that assumes I've got the 3 minutes to do that, but that's the right way to go there, isn't it?
That's a fantastic question to ask. The physicians are going to ask themselves first, do I have time to listen to the answer that I'm going to get? And so the utility of the question that you suggest is bang on 100%. The practicality is going to be up to the physician to know how much time they have. So they do have to balance the patients that are coming. If they ask some patients that question, they could be there for 20 minutes. And I think that's a fear, which is why they might not ask open-ended questions like that.
Well, it's interesting. You don't have to ask that question to everybody, but if you know that the question is available, there might be some people who would really benefit from it. Is it Jose Willems who made the comment that the question you should ask everybody, well, or Tom Marjo, the question you should ask everybody once a year is, tell me what's changed in your life in the last year?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I've heard that as well. I think especially the patients that you start to have indications that there are comorbidities that could impact, in our case today, the discussion we're having, liver health, if it's going to impact their liver health and they already have some indicators, maybe even on the first visit, or you've gotten back biomarkers or other types of information that says that they're going to be at risk, those are the ones that you spend the extra time with, maybe asking those questions if you do have to titrate the time you have available for patients.
So, Mike, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been a great conversation, and I look forward to seeing you next month in Amsterdam. Will probably be the next time we get together.
I will definitely save a seat for you.
It's a deal. Thanks. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Finally, this week's expert is hepatologist and key opinion leader Mazen Noureddin. Mazen discusses some of the major advances in drug development in the past year, focusing heavily on what we are learning about FGF21s and GLP-glucagon combinations.
So this week, our expert interview is with our good friend Mazen Noureddin, who every friend of the podcast knows before. I understand that Mazen had a birthday yesterday. Happy birthday.
Thank you, Roger.
I'm not going to give up how old you are, because on birthdays it's fair to talk about that stuff, but on the day after it isn't. Except to say that you look pretty good for your age. I'll give you that one. Mazen, you've been a really busy guy recently. What have you been up to?
Oh, man. Million things. A lot of positive readouts in the trials. We were going to share some exciting news that Houston Research Institute that I established less than 3 years ago is now part of Pinnacle Clinical Research, that they have 15 sites and going beyond that to 30. And as you know, like Pinnacle and Summit Clinical Research, they are sister companies. They do different things, but I also took some leadership roles in both organizations along with Gail, the co-founder of Summit. So it's really exciting, and we're growing rapidly. We have some exciting news to announce. I think you're going to do that next week or so on your episodes, and we're recruiting really exciting people while we're growing and adding many services. So,
well, fantastic stuff. And actually, in 2 weeks, I've mentioned this in the business report to this episode as well. In 2 weeks, we're going to dedicate an episode to Summit and to Pinnacle, really. The discussion will be about drug development, which is something we're going to be talking about today as part of the month-long roundtable. And then instead of a typical newsmaker and expert, we're going to take a look at two aspects of Summit and Pinnacle in the aftermath of Stephen Harrison's passing. One being the influence he had on all of you, and the second one being how the two firms are growing together and what that means. And yeah, I understand there'll be some announcements as part of that. I've heard one of them already. I think is pretty cool. We're not going to give that away today, but that's exciting stuff.
Let me put it this way: he will be looking down, happy and proud of all of us, like the people, like the number of KOLs we have in the network, the number of the trials, the expansions. It's amazing how a company starts, and as doctors, we don't know how to do business, but the companies have grown like significantly significantly with business people, some scientific people and doctors as well. And we're doing clinical research as I always wanted.
So we'll save that for next week, the definition of as I always wanted. What we're going to do for today, though, is Mazen will be our expert for the year on drug development. He'll drop in every couple of months, and we'll talk a little bit about drug development. This is our first session. So I think maybe a good place to start today would just be, as you look at the drug development landscape today from where you sit, what are the things going on that people need to know about? And what is your overall impression of how good or how bad this space is right now to be playing in?
Let me try to be as concise because I want people to listen to this in 25 minutes and get the updates. And as you know, your podcast has been also very informative, and a lot of people take the information from here and run with it. So we have to be very precise, and you keep us honest all the time. But Roger, like 4 or 5 years ago, and I know like there were investors listening to this, and there were people in the field and other fields, and it sounded depressing a little bit, right? A lot of failures, the biopsy issues, and it sounded like we're just like trying to infuse optimism to keep the field going. But I think we're like seeing signals within, and we like any person involved in MASH research and at IITs, the errors with the biopsy, and finally, boom, we got the first drug approval, resmetirom, last year with hitting both endpoints. We expected maybe just one endpoint, and then multiple New England Journal papers and more coming, as well as Lancet, and positive trials really one after the other. And with the most recent announcement that there was one-stage fibrosis improvement in MASH cirrhotic patients when you extended the treatment long enough from 36 to 96 weeks, that's through the efruxifermin data. We have 3 solid FGF21s in the pipeline, 2 in phase 3, 1 in phase 2. We do have an oral drug approved for therapy. People are getting treated. We have efforts increasing for screening. Likely like the screening requirements and quality requirements will change in the future. We have another drug, lanifibranor, PAM-PPR, in just finished enrollment in the study, which is very exciting. Survodutide by BI, dual GLP-1 and glucagon, published in the New England Journal phase 2 and phase 3 trial is running, including in cirrhotics that they recruit without a biopsy. Semaglutide, GLP-1, just presented a few months ago the positive phase 3 study. We expect approval this year, if not early the next year, and the future looks bright. And I can highlight FGF21s a little bit more, but let me go back to you.
Okay.
To keep us honest.
All right. Let's start here, right? When we started this podcast, the first time we had Jorn Schattenberg on this podcast, about 5 months in, he was talking about an article he'd recently written about lessons from the NASH, what's called the NASH graveyard. And we would joke about how it was, NASH 11, pharmaceutical 0. And now we're obviously in a very, very different place. I've always believed that drug markets don't mature until you've got multiple different ways to treat patients, and you can treat the most challenging patients. So you mentioned cirrhosis at one point. I think that's one of the issues. Is cirrhotics obviously are the patient. People with cirrhosis are people most in need of treatment. And then this is a complicated disease, so different people are going to need 4 or 5 different modes of action of drugs. Where do you see the greatest momentum right now? First on, we'll do cirrhosis, and then we'll come back and talk about diversity of patient types. But where do you see the greatest momentum right now in cirrhosis?
I will talk about cirrhosis, but I just want to make sure I'm biased between all MOAs. And I think we have a great momentum altogether. And I've been talking about this like for the years, like we're going to get there. I think we got there now. And now we're going to talk about efficacy and more efficacy, and not in competition, rather in combination. But let's talk about the cirrhosis for a second. And that highlights the FGF21 class in particular, that FGF21s has proven, which is injectable drug, has proven that is here to stay. And has proven in particular that it's going to target this F3 and F4 patients in particular. And at one point, people will say like, it's really difficult to reverse cirrhosis. Why you just don't focus on F2 and F3? So if I want to go to efruxifermin for a second, and there was a recent announcement, press release from Cairo that you're welcome to go to it, but also we will present this data at AASLD as a late breaker. And basically in a randomized control trial and a study that lasted for 96 weeks, where a baseline biopsy was performed 36 weeks and then 96 weeks. And we got to the 36 weeks, which we looked at fibrosis improvement, and there was no fibrosis improvement that was statistically significant. And when you look at the numbers, you could tell that he will get there. And eventually we get to 96 weeks and they announced that there was fibrosis improvement in cirrhosis. Some people call it reversibility of cirrhosis, which we would never imagine we will get that. Importantly, I want you to stay tuned for the AASLD. And one of the questions that we get always, how sick were these patients, were they really early in the disease, and that will reveal at the AASLD. I cannot disclose much now because of the data has not presented, but those will be presented, and we'll see if that's really the case. Still, if that is really the case, that patients were really mild and reversed, it's a huge success for the field. And most importantly for our patients that otherwise need to wait for transplant.
Yeah, well, so Al Leilas, who's one of the panelists for the Roundtable this month, did make the comment that his sense of the data from the Emerging Trends Conference, the data what was shared there on Akero, on efruxifermin, was that some of those patients were reasonably sick, not just kind of borderline cirrhosis. So it'll be interesting to see what you produce on that front at AASLD.
What I tell people in general in these trials is look if there's any transient elastography more than 20 or 25 and all these things. And probably we don't have all data analyzed by then, but something to watch for in general.
But it's not only efruxifermin, right?
So we have in phase 3 also bigozafermin that is published in the New England Journal, and they have a trial on pre-cirrhotic that was published there, as well as a trial in cirrhotic that's going in phase 3. They reached statistical significance in NASH resolution and fibrosis improvement. I wonder about their placebo rate. It's a bit on the lower side, if that can be replicated. And then the other drug is coming behind them quickly and efficiently and thoughtfully is the efimosfermin, which is an FGF21, and it has an advantage that it's once monthly injection. And we presented the data at AASLD where we showed there was both fibrosis improvement and NASH resolution in a very good delta, along with NIT signal, and I expect them to enter phase 3 very soon.
So that's 3 FGF21s that are successful, which I think should be enough to put to rest any concerns from the first FGF21, which I guess the BMS drug whose name I'm forgetting right now, that did not do well. That the mode of action has a lot of value even if one drug didn't make it work. Those are drugs that are targeted really at the liver per se and at fibrosis, MASH, but really fibrotic. Let's run around to the metabolic side of the table and talk for a second about what's going on there that you find most exciting.
So we just departed from FGF21s, but they do have metabolic. They have lipid-lowering property, and you will see the drop in the lipid panel, the bad ones and the good ones. There was A1C improvement with the efimosfermin by 0.5 and some hints here and there from the others. So there are additional metabolic, but you probably also want to know more about one of the elephants in the room that it's now invading the world, the epidemic of obesity, and those are the other drugs. So again, let me summarize them for those who are new to this podcast. The current drugs, let's start with the 2 orals in phase 3. Resmetirom, and you say, oh, it got approved. Resmetirom is still in the trial. They got subpart H approval, and they're going to get final approval, hopefully and expectedly, when they have the long-term study that is ongoing to get the biopsy to show prevention of cirrhosis. So that's one. Number 2 is lanifibranor, finish enrollment in phase 3, positive results in phase 2. And let's go to the 4 injectables. We already talked about bigozafermin and efruxifermin, so we're up to 4. Number 5, and now we're going to enter what you're asking me, the semaglutide and the survodutide. So those are also injectable. So 2 orals, 4 injectables. We're talking about the last 2, semaglutide. They, in a trial that I mentioned, NASH resolution, fibrosis improvement, and they have the positive effect of weight loss. Has been in the market for some time. It has thousands of patients' data on cardiovascular, preventing kidney disease, as well as other metabolic holistic effects. Survodutide, the same story, weight loss effect, but it has an addition to the GLP-1, likely what we think a direct mechanism on the liver, which is the glucagon, in addition to the GLP-1 in a ratio 1:8, with stress receptor there affecting fatty acid oxidation, and thus maybe more effect on fibrosis. And that's probably seen in their phase 2.
Do me a favor. You used a phrase that we don't talk about a lot on this podcast when we talk about this class of drugs, which is a ratio of 1:8. Can you explain what the ratio means? Can you explain what you're comparing it to and why it matters?
All right. So we're getting deeper. So, okay, that also takes me to other drugs. So GLP-1, semaglutide is GLP-1 only. When you have with the GLP-1s multiple kinds, so you have the GLP-1 semaglutide alone, blockbuster drug, right? It helped a lot of patients out there. It's on CNN and news all the time. There's another drug, actually, that's the dual G. Now we're going to the dual G, which is tirzepatide. Tirzepatide is a GLP-1 as well as GIP. The GIP, we still, it has roles in the liver. We still are trying to understand it better. They have done very well in phase 2 study where they showed NASH resolution and fibrosis improvement by Lilly. And we went from 1G to 2G, and I'm going to go again back to 3G and go back to Lilly because they have the triple G. So their double G is GLP-1 GIP. There's another double G, which is GLP-1 and glucagon. And glucagon is what's attracting most hepatologists. We're excited about it. Why? Because there are receptors in the liver. And what Roger is asking me, what do you mean by this ratio? So it's how many GLP-1s you put in front of glucagon in a simple language. So there is the 1-in-1 by pemvidutide, which is also a very promising drug in phase 2 that you need to watch out for it. And this drug is going to have a very exciting data because phase 2B, and this is the first GLP-1 that look at paired biopsy at 6 months, which is much shorter duration. So based on their MRI PDFF data, we think that they're going to hit both within 6 months. Still a very high bar to achieve, but it will be very exciting. So that's 1-in-1. So survodutide showed that already NASH resolution fibrosis improvement, the ratio is 1-to-8. There's another drug by Merck, phenobarbital, which has only MRI data that is very exciting. Their PDFF study compared their drug pheno to semaglutide, and that it was a smart comparison where they showed they did better on MRI than semaglutide, and even they showed in people that they lose less than 5%, which we think the effect from sema is coming from a lot of weight loss. They showed that if you lose less than 5%, you still have effect of a pheno on the liver because the glucagon receptors. So those three drugs that we have, very exciting. They have different ratio. I don't know what's the significance for it. Everyone's saying maybe this better, this is better, but I think that needs to be proven in trials. And I always try not to compare across drugs unless if we do head-to-head comparison. Finally, also to let people know, there are drugs that are a little bit behind the scene or multiple attempts that either improve GLP-1s and duals pharmacologically, or they're being combined with FGF21. So the field, even despite these 6 entering, also there are multiple followers. Although you have not seen them in phase 2 yet, we're seeing them and we're getting asked about what is the best next step.
Do me a favor. Remembering that my last natural science course was high school biology. A ratio of 1-to-1 obviously means one GLP-1 to 1 glucagon. What's 1-to-8? Which is the 1 and which is the 8 on that?
The 1 and 8 is survodutide. So the concept with 1-to-1 is like sometimes people think that glucagon, for instance, has some side effects. Most importantly, increase glucose levels in the blood. And that we have not seen in pemvidutide. And that's like the thing that they talk about glucagon as well. So there's a less glucagon in survodutide in general compared to sema in that ratio that makes these ratio balanced enough not to have side effects, yet you get a little bit of sniff of glucagon on the liver while you're getting the effect of GLP-1 and weight loss, if that makes sense.
The more even ratio means more glucagon.
Yeah.
So we're looking now at just things that are already late stage, right? You mentioned lanifibranor, PPAR, a GLP-1, a GLP-GIP, a GLP-glucagon, a 3G, an FGF21, right?
I forgot about the triple G.
Triple G, right.
I could be wrong, but it's the triple G, like triple gun, if you want to say. And their study is, weight loss study, they showed almost like a bariatric surgery weight loss effect, Roger, and that's up to 25%. And the question was if they're going to do well on NASH. They had a sub-study where MRI PDFF improved significantly. And I still don't know what will happen with Lilly in the future, but I'm hearing some encouraging messages that they are probably going to go to NASH. And this is important. Why? Because most GLP-1 and duals, they're going to lead to weight loss. They're going to improve cardiovascular outcomes because of the weight loss and maybe additional direct effect, kidney, sleep apnea. But the liver could be a differentiator, how much fibrosis you can improve, especially with the direct receptor. So if you have the hypothesis is if you have all three receptors, probably going to have more liver effects. But also we have to talk about the tolerance, the discontinuation of these medications, all that play a role in the big picture.
Would it be safe to say the more medications that we've got that have G's in them somewhere, the more different ways we have to respond to what's going on in the individual patient in terms of not only liver, but I mean, if I recall correctly, is it sema that just got indicated for sleep apnea, or was that tirzepatide, one or the other? I get confused.
That's tirzepatide. And everyone, you need to do the study to use it for indication, but you lose weight, your neck, I don't want to simplify it that way. I'm not like sleep apnea expert. Your neck is less thick and you have less sleep apnea.
From personal experience, I know that's true because I know how often I got punched in the middle of the night for snoring when I was 50 pounds heavier than I am now. I know how often I get punched now. This is a lot better.
Do you have a machine, Roger?
No, I don't. When I lost the weight, I needed none of it. I have no signs of sleep apnea anymore.
I see. Here you go.
Yeah, so there you are.
Your neck looks fine to me.
Oh, sweetheart. That's the nicest thing you've said to me. So these are the obvious things that are going on. Further back up the pipeline, let's just take a couple of minutes. If I'm looking back from there, what other classes of drugs are emerging that we think are really going to be promising in the future downstream?
Oh, you want to go through the pipeline of phase 2?
Just at a high level. We got 5 minutes.
There are a lot of de novo lipogenesis drug that they can affect the synthesis of fat in the liver, like the Fascinate trial. Gosh, I'm spacing on their name now.
Choudhury is the company, and the drug is called Denafenstat.
Yes, that's that. So sorry for that. So they affect de novo lipogenesis. They had a very good results in phase 2, very promising, but hair loss came up as a big issue. There's a big issue there. And there's other de novo lipogenesis. Some data was presented from Pfizer on 2 de novo lipogenesis drugs that one worked a little bit higher on the upstream and a little bit lower in the upstream to counter effect the effect of hypertriglyceridemia with one of them. Showed a hint of positivity. There's a mitochondrial uncoupler in the liver HU6 that I presented before and we published in Lancet Gastro is one of them. And they have another read for another trial coming out soon. FXRs are a little bit on the kind of like backpedaling right now. We'll see what Gilead read. They have a de novo lipogenesis drug as well as FXR. FXRs, in my opinion, is actually still an effective drug. It's just we had a bad story with Intercept, unfortunately, but I don't think it's not an ineffective drug. They are probably anti-inflammatory drugs that some companies are entering into it, which I cannot disclose now, but there are few in the pipeline. There's a very complicated figure I published in Hepatology as a review in 2023, but that's what the field looks like, how complex. So I'll refer you to that Hepatology paper, or I can send it to you, Roger, if you want to post that complicated figure.
If you want to send it to me, I'll link to it and put it up on the site along with this article. That's great.
And I bet you, maybe I can draw on it what has been updated since then.
That would be fantastic. That would be really special. Okay, so I just want to make sure we have things to talk about in a couple of months. I'm sure we will because I know we're going to have a lot of papers coming out of EASL. But do you see any storm clouds on this horizon? Any at all? Is the sky completely bright or is there any storm cloud anywhere in this?
If I go off the cuff, there's always a problem, right? The more successful we are, the more problems we are. I always say, I think the best attitude in the morning, you say, okay, which problem I'm going to solve today in a calm manner? I can guarantee you today that I had a couple of problems that I did not solve them in a calm manner. So tomorrow I will solve the problems with a better calm manner. But it goes like that. Sometimes it hits you hard, sometimes it hits you less. And we just have to look forward, make sure we're like focusing on our patients and the field and therapies. Our colleagues before my time, they did it with hepatitis C, hepatitis B, IBD, and here we are for MASH.
I'll comment on that. Our friend Steven used to quote Michael Jordan talking about the reason he made so many shots to win games was because he missed so many shots to win games, and it was the missing that taught him how to make them. This could just be the same thing again. Okay, well, thank you. Mazen just got off a plane from Miami and jumped on so he could do this interview. Let me let you settle in a little bit for the evening, and I will send this into production, and we will get this episode out. Thank you so much for your time tonight, and I look forward to having you back with us in a week or two, okay? And congratulations on all the exciting things you're doing.
I appreciate it. And Roger, I just want to say, keep doing what you're doing. A lot of people learn from you, and that's what we need in the field.
Thank you, my friend. Bye-bye.
Take care.
And here's Roger with the Season 6, Episode 4 Business Report.
Slava Ukraini, Kroyim Slava. It's remarkable to think that other world events could have pushed the Ukraine-Russia situation completely off our front pages for a week, but I guess that's the kind of thing that the threat of a global tariff war will do. Here's hoping that nothing too dramatic happens on the global tariff front, and similarly, that the situation in Ukraine continues to improve.
On the listener front, good news keeps rolling in.
I want to thank you as listeners for a couple of things that have happened in the last week. First of all, our listener numbers continue to go up. Second, one of our 3 conversations, the one with Jeff McIntyre, actually broke 100 downloads in the first 3 days after it was out. That would have put it in the probably top 5 or 10% historically of all the conversations we've ever done. So thanks for your level of interest. The other 2 scored pretty well as well. And we will have those conversations every week from this week out.
The next few weeks have a lot going on.
This is the last week of our Emerging Trends Conference Roundtable. Starting next week, our 4-week roundtable will discuss advances in drug development over the last year. And that roundtable will run us right into EASL. We plan to devote our April roundtable drug development every year going forward in honor and memory of our departed colleague Stephen Harrison. This year, we will devote our entire April 24th posting, which falls one day after the first anniversary of his death, to Stephen. In place of the usual Newsmaker and expert segments, that week we will have 2 segments on Stephen's companies, Summit and Pinnacle. One on the long-term impact of his influence on those companies, and the other on the steps they are taking and have taken in the past year to implement his vision moving into the the future. Also, as of next week, Summit Clinical Research is officially becoming a silver sponsor for Surfing the MASH Tsunami.
V2.0 still has room for easel previews.
One limitation for this approach is that it does not leave explicit space for full episodes to preview major conferences. Instead, we're going to take 2 weeks of Newsmaker segments before EASL, and then later in the year AASLD, maybe 1 or 2 other conferences, to devote those segments to identifying topics of interest in the conference itself and presentations we think people shouldn't miss. Louise and Jorn will join me for those, along with an additional guest or two. I've got more to say, but I'm losing my voice progressively, so let me just say goodbye for now, and I'll take you back to the episode.
Please join us again next week when we start a new roundtable on advances in drug development in the last year, while our newsmakers and experts explore current issues and major ideas.
Until then, stay safe, surf on, and we'll see you next week on the Surfing the MASH Tsunami podcast. Hopefully I'll have my whole voice back by then. Bye-bye now.